Imagine a queen in a glowing palace dressed in the finest silk, her hair piled high like a work of art, and her neck dripping with pearls. From far away, she looks like a goddess, but step closer, and your nose wrinkles. Her hair is filled with lice. Her skin hasn't touched water in weeks. Her perfume can't hide the sour stink beneath it. Welcome to the dirty truth about royal women. We often think of queens and noble ladies as perfect, clean, and elegant. But in the past, even the most powerful women lived in filthy conditions, smelled terrible, and suffered through things you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. Today, we're uncovering 5 of the worst hygiene practices royal women had to live with. These habits were so disgusting, it's hard to believe they were real, but they were. And if you think royal life was all ball gowns and fairy tales, think again. In today's world, we think bathing is basic. Showers, soap, shampoo, all part of a normal day. But back in the 1600s and 1700s, especially in France, royal women avoided baths like they were poison. Why? Because people believed bathing could kill you. Doctors at the time thought that hot water opened up your skin and let in dangerous air and sickness. They warned women that washing too often made them weak or even sinful. Religious leaders called bathhouses places of vanity and temptation, and they discouraged people from using them. So royal women stopped bathing. Instead, they used small cloths dipped in alcohol, vinegar, or sometimes their own spit to wipe their hands, faces, and maybe their necks. The rest of the body, left alone. The idea of a full body wash was not just strange, it was seen as dangerous. And when a bath did happen, it wasn't relaxing or clean. Families shared one tub of water. The men bathed first, then the children, and finally the women. By the time a noblewoman stepped in, the water was cold, cloudy, smelly, and filled with dirt, dead skin, and other people's sweat. The Palace of Versailles may have looked like heaven, but it smelled like something much worse. Guests often wrote letters describing the horrible stink, a mix of sweat, dirty clothes, rotting perfume, and mold. Underneath those heavy dresses and sweet perfumes, the truth was this: royal women were filthy. They were beautiful on the outside and downright nasty underneath. Now imagine living in a giant palace with hundreds of rooms, dozens of ballrooms, and thousands of guests, but almost no toilets. That's what life was like in Versailles. There were very few bathrooms in the entire palace, so people, including noble ladies, used chamber pots. These were small bowls or buckets kept under beds or behind curtains. When they needed to relieve themselves, they did it in the pot. And then what? Well, someone, maybe a servant, or sometimes the person themselves, would take the pot and throw it out the window. If you were walking outside at the wrong time, you could be hit with a disgusting surprise from above. The streets below were full of waste and filth. The gardens, which looked beautiful in paintings, were often used as toilets by nobles who didn't want to wait, and it didn't stop there. Some men urinated off balconies, some used the palace stairs or even corners of the hallways. Versailles may have looked like a dream, but it smelled like a nightmare. It got so bad that the king finally gave an order. The palace must be cleaned once a week, not every day, not even after every event, just once a week, and that was seen as an improvement. And what about wiping? There was no toilet paper. People used rags, straw, leaves, or even their bare hands. Most didn't wash after. It's no wonder that diseases and parasites spread fast. Royal women had to walk carefully, not just to show off their dresses, but to avoid stepping in human waste. That was life in one of the richest places on earth. Royal hairstyles were massive. Some were over a foot tall. These weren't just hairdos. They were works of art, built with wire, cotton, horsehair, and thick layers of animal fat to hold everything together. Women decorated them with flowers, pearls, feathers, and even model ships. But underneath all that beauty was something awful: lice. Because royal women didn't wash their hair often, and their wigs were rarely cleaned, lice made their home in these towering hairstyles. And they weren't just a small problem. These bugs formed full colonies, crawling through the wigs and biting the scalp day and night. To deal with the itching, ladies carried special tools, long silver lice claws. These were pretty, elegant sticks with little hooks on the end. Women used them to scratch under their wigs during parties and dinners, even during important royal events. Imagine being at a banquet, dressed like a queen, sipping wine, and secretly scratching your lice-covered head. These wigs were also dangerous. Some were so heavy that women suffered from neck and back pain. Others caught on fire from nearby candles. But still, women wore them every day. Why? Because at court, fashion meant power, and no woman dared look less than perfect, even if she was crawling with insects and smelled like old beef fat. Poor women had an easier choice. They shaved their heads. But for noble women, that would have meant shame. So instead, they smiled through the itching and hid a whole bug zoo under their crowns. When you think of royal meals, you probably imagine golden plates, roast pigs, towers of sweets, and music playing in the background. But the truth behind those feasts: rotten meat, dirty kitchens, and food full of germs. Versailles had bad plumbing, and sometimes sewage would back up into the kitchens. Yes, poop water got into the place where royal meals were made. Even Queen Marie Antoinette's private kitchen was flooded with waste at one point. There were no fridges, so meat spoiled quickly, fruit was left out for days, rats and flies ran across the food, but the servants still had to serve it. The result? Royal women and men often suffered from stomach pain, diarrhea, vomiting, and worst of all, parasites. Tapeworms were common. These long, disgusting worms grew inside people's intestines. Some grew up to 6 inches long or more. Even King Louis XIV, the most powerful man in France, had to deal with them. And royal women, they were expected to eat with perfect manners, smile, chat, flirt, even if their insides were twisting in pain. Many noble ladies ate spoiled meat and sickened silently just to keep up appearances. Looking rich was easy. Staying healthy? Not so much. Now let's talk about something deeply personal and painful: childbirth. You might think a royal woman could give birth in peace, but in the 17th and 18th centuries, having a baby was a public event. When a queen went into labor, dozens of people came to watch, not to help, not to comfort, just to make sure the baby wasn't swapped with another. People feared that if the baby died or was a girl, someone might try to secretly switch it for a healthy boy. So the mother had to lie there, in pain, fear, and surrounded by strangers, and give birth in front of an audience. When Queen Marie-Thérèse gave birth, the room was so full of people, it looked like a theatre. Marie Antoinette passed out after giving birth because the room was so hot, crowded, and stressful. And back then, childbirth was very dangerous. Doctors didn't wash their hands. Tools weren't clean. There were no antibiotics. Many women died from infections. Babies, too. In fact, 1 out of every 3 children died before their 3rd birthday. For royal women, having babies wasn't a joyful moment. It was a performance, filled with pain, pressure, and real risk of death. And all they could do was smile and suffer, for the sake of the crown. So now you know, underneath the lace and diamonds, royal life was filthy, painful, and dangerous. These women were dressed like goddesses but lived with lice, rot, parasites, and public shame. They had power, money, and beauty, but they couldn't enjoy it. Not when they were itching, vomiting, sweating, and walking through poop-covered halls. If you ever dreamed of being a queen, you might want to thank your lucky stars you were born in the modern world. Because in the world of royal women, everything sparkled on the outside and stank underneath. Thanks for watching. And remember, history isn't just fascinating. Sometimes it's disgustingly real.